It was for the iMac, wasn't it? No.
No. Said he was buying Macbook and only things he's done 5. She was sitting back there and I was talking about his Macbook.
I thought that was for the order from Mobile Centrics.
No, that would have been $59.
I don't know, ask him. I don't remember.
275 for the MacBook.
Oh, I don't know.
The
I
job
can't remember.
was talking
What's up, Dave?
to that guy. Like he was talking to him.
Oh, yeah. The 3. I know what you're talking about now. Never mind. Never mind. What's up, Polly? I'll move this down so I can see it. Make bigger monitors. Anthony is here. So we're gonna start off on something a little different. I'm gonna go over. It's probably windy as hell. I'm sure y'all can hear all of it, but sorry. I'm gonna go over the basics on data recovery whenever we do chip off for Androids. I get a lot of people that ask how we do it. It's not overly complicated. It just requires like a little bit of basic knowledge on where stuff's stored, and I didn't really know much of where things were when we started. So I wonder if mic is. Yeah, it's picking it up. Okay, you can hear me, right? Other than the massive amounts of wind. Yeah, there's fans blowing everywhere. Stop right now. Stop. So when I started doing Android like chip off, I started with the eMMC stuff. So the eMMC chips are fairly basic. They can be read with just an adapter that goes straight into an SD card slot. To enjoy the packaging, yeah, we're gonna show the packaging here in a minute, Anthony. That way everybody can see what you've been sending me. It's inappropriate. Yeah, we're gonna show his artwork off. But I'm gonna kind of go over what we do for general data recovery from Android systems. If you do eMMC, is the scope reversed? I don't know why it's reversed. Hold on, I'll flip it around. I've been trying to get it set. There. So I'm trying to give a little overview on how you can do like general Android recovery. Some of the UFS stuff, which this was a UFS dump from an S6 for data recovery, you would have to have a little more expensive equipment. eMMC stuff can be done with just simple adapters that go to a SD card slot. You can pick them up fairly cheap online. But the UFS stuff requires something like this is the Dedi Prog UFS reader. They run quite a bit more expensive. They're about $1,100. But it does allow you to do some of the UFS stuff. You can read all of the UFS chips. The problem is Android, after Android 6.0 native phones are encrypted. So when we read those chips, I can see all the partitions. And I'll show you the partition table on this chip, and then we'll also go over the actual usable partition that we pull from it. Let me pull that back up real quick. I'm going to switch over to schematic view here. I don't know why chat's... Why is there chat in the chat window? Oh, it's because I have YouTube chat pulled up too. Alright, we'll turn that off. Scaling is all wrong here. Let's move this around so we can scale this a little better. Okay, so this is the software that comes with the DediProg. As you can see, it recognizes the chip and it gives me the chip information down here. It's very common when the chips are dead, it will not give me this chip information. Unfortunately, the S6 is pretty bad about dead chips. What's up, Nate? And Mark, how you doing? Long time. But the problem is, and it sucks because I really want to be able to recover this stuff, but a lot of the UFS chips seem to be dead when they arrive. Usually it's caused from a phone that won't boot up and it's stuck at the logo, and software updates don't fix it. When we mount the chip, sometimes they'll mount but the data will be fully corrupt, or they won't mount at all, and that tends to be pretty reoccurring. But if the chip does recognize and mounts on the UFS readers, you can hit read IC and it'll pull up the partition tables, so we'll be able to see the different sectors. So you've got different sectors across the top here, and the user section is in 1.0. So what we would do is we would click save from memory. It's telling me, are you sure you want to use the automatic region that's defined? That's the section of blocks that it's already looking at. Moderator chat only enabled. Yeah, pretty much. Almost. So you would just say yes, then you would name your file and you would save it. I've already got it backed up here. It's 32 gigabyte file if you look at the file size there. So after we have that, we would close out of here and we would pull up. I use Recovery Explorer, UFS Explorer. They make a bunch of software for them. They're like $100 I think for the software, but it's really useful. You can even use it to recover like drives that will mount to a computer but aren't readable. You can do recovery on them and actually view file structures inside of them. So once you open up this user partition, if you look at it, I'm going to go back one step. This is the bin file that I created, and you can see all these partitions inside of it. Now when I say that a user partition is encrypted, the last piece down here, this partition at the bottom, which is usually the largest, the 25 gig section, that section is user data. Whenever a chip is encrypted, this section will be non-readable. It'll be a raw format, but you can read all the other sections, which have like system files in them. You can go through all of these and look. You can see just different system files. Like there's some of this will have recovery. If I can find the recovery partition stuff. Let's see. So here's some of the basics, like in the background, that you don't normally see. Just settings and stuff that most users won't ever use. Let me see. Like more different framework and stuff for the phone. But in this last section, there's actually usable files. So once you get a good read and you can get to this section, the main things you're going to want are user files, which are going to be pictures, any type of app data that may be saved in the section that you can actually view on your phone if it's not rooted. And then you're also going to want like contacts and text messages. So contacts and text messages are normally stored either in the data folder under the comms Android contacts, and I'll spread this out so you can see it. So this is comms Android contacts, providers contacts, and then under database, this is where all your phone numbers are stored. And then on some phones, the text messages are saved in the comm Android providers telephony, which is weird. But there's no database there. So what I do normally is go up here to the top and search. So the text message database is eMMC SMS. So if I hit search, it'll go through that section. And then our file we're looking for is this one right here. What is it? iCloud lock?
Yeah. I showed you a couple a while back. You should get a website you can use it and it's like just looking at some gas money, man. I ain't trying to waste your arm on it. How's that baby?
6'6". Just went to the doctor today.
Hey, Dad.
Got RSV, has a positive for that, so it's cold.
Alright, so what's up? Yeah.
An ear infection. Yeah, but he's a technical 6 person. He has the last product.
I mean, I don't know if the screen's in there placed on it or not. Let me look and see.
If I knew the answer to that one, man, I'd give it to you. But I'm not sure
It's original.
that means you can knock it off on that side, right? Oh, I got
I mean, F6. It's got a scratch in the screen. I mean, gonna do like $20. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
No problem. Have a good one. Is chat still working? Oh, there it goes. $5.
Give you burger.
So, with when you search for eMMC SMS, this is going to be where your text messages and multimedia messages are. You'll save that database also. I've already done all this, but just kind of showing you where they're located. If there are visual voicemails on the phone, if you go up here and type VVM, which stands for visual voicemail, if there are any on it, it will find them. It looks like nothing. These files aren't useful. Visual voicemail is usually a folder, and it will have audio files inside of it. So once you get all that information, you're going to want to find the user documents. So those are located in the media folder under 0. And this is going to be everything that the user can see on their phone. What they would normally use, like if they downloaded something or if they took like pictures, like here's your camera and everything, they're all in this folder. If you go back, you can go like to downloads. Here's anything and everything that may have been downloaded on the phone. Movies. Let's see, I don't think they have anything in there. But anything in here. So voice recorder, if they have any audio recorded on that app, it would be there. They have WhatsApp there. I don't think they have. I think this was a Verizon phone, if I remember correctly. I don't think there was anything on it. Like saved emails. So there's some emails that were saved. Those all can be dumped off and read. But yeah, this is pretty much all your user documents. So what I normally do is save that whole folder. Once you have those off, you'll have a folder structure kind of like this. I've already converted the contacts files using a converter that takes it from the database to a vCard file. Those files can be used to, you can open that on Windows computer, or you can drop it directly back into the phone and then import it with the contacts manager, and it will repopulate all your contacts. Is it possible to copy this data? You can copy the data and move it over to another UFS. You cannot move the UFS to another phone though. Those chips are encrypted with the CPU, and the CPU and the actual chips, they share a key. So if you transfer them, whenever you boot the device up, it will ask you for the encryption key, and in my experience, no matter if you put in the correct password or not, it never will recover. It will say that the contents are not able to be decrypted, and you must format it and reinstall the OS to use it. So now these actual files that we pull, like this stuff here, you can drop directly back in. If you had root, you can actually place these files back into the root section of the phone, and they would repopulate and be there. This the 0 folder, which is the data folder, you can drop all this directly back into a phone and it will work. But with the multimedia messaging or the SMS, what we have to do is we're gonna cut that and take it over to a folder. This is a converter that someone has created, and we're gonna paste that SMS file in here, and then I've got just a little thing written down that shows me the command I have to run, so I don't have to try to look it up every time I remember it. And I'm just going to run a command prompt. I'll pull that up so you can see it. So here's the command prompt, and I'm just going to paste that code. And now it's going to ask me to give a name to the file I want to save. So I'm going to save it as messages.xml and hit enter. And now it's done. If we go over here, we have the messages XML and this. I'm going to cut these both and take them back to the folder I was at and paste them back in. So now with this messages XML file, you can put that on the phone and then use a program called SMS backup, and you can actually restore this file so all the text messages will repopulate back onto a new device, new Android device. So these database files are kind of useless now, but I do keep them on there just in case for some reason these two files are corrupt. I don't want to open the contacts file because it's going to open up individual windows for every contact they have. And I don't want to go through the user documents, obviously, because it's their stuff and it's also on a video, so you all don't need to see what they have. But this is pretty much what you'll do for backing up any Android device. And for eMMC backups, we charge $65 for businesses. For a person, we would charge $100. For UFS recovery, we charge $125. For a customer walking in, you're looking at $150. These type of repairs are easy to do for eMMC for data recovery. You can make a lot of money on them, and it doesn't require anything fancy. Literally just hop on Amazon and you can find them. You'll look for the BGA pattern. So usually the BGA chipsets, let me pull it up for you so you can see them. So we'll just go to Amazon and check, and we're going to do eMMC reader, and you can see there's a bunch of them. This one plugs into a SD card slot. Okay. And they have different chipsets. This one's BGA 169, 153. This is 162, 186. If you don't want to buy all these, what I use is a eMMC booster, which is made by the company that makes eMMC Pro. So I use this little booster box, and it comes with a board you can solder to, but it's not as useful because soldering a chip on and off constantly just takes time. What I actually use is what's in this image here. It's similar, it may not be the same, but I use the booster with a More C adapter, and this has sockets for pretty much everything. Actually, you can see them here. So this has sockets for different chipset sizes, and it fits pretty much anything you'll run into. And as you can see, it also has the SD card adapter you can put on that, so you don't even have to have technically the booster. But I do like having the booster because it seems to be more consistent as far as my reads go. But it does come, if you look in the picture, it has an SD card reader here and the SD card adapter. The more C adapter, I'm not sure how much they are. I think they're like $100 and something. Let's see. So, where's just the adapter at? That's not it. I just want the adapter. Well, I don't know where the damn adapter is. Let me type in eMMC. That might be it. eMMC one. Yeah, so that's it there. So this is what you'll get. This is currently unavailable. Not very much help to you all, but that's what you're going to look for. So it's the eMMC Pro. And it, like I said, it comes with the adapters for the different chipset sizes. That one even comes with the socket that you can use for JTAG devices, and this is also for JTAG device for data communication across. But so, quick overview, kind of give you all an idea, a way to make a little extra money. I know a few people have asked me about it and had questions. I figured I would just cover that. So now we're gonna do a MacBook Pro. This one came in, I've tested it for about a week and it's finally started messing up. It's restarting randomly, like it'll just shut down for no reason, and then you have to boot it back up. I was looking on Lewis's forums. This seems to be a fairly common problem. So what it seems like is these MOSFETs, which is what we replaced on Anthony's computer a couple weeks ago. These MOSFETs for the CPU, the 3 phases of the power, they seem to fail randomly, but they don't stay dead. Like if you turn the computer off and turn it back on, it'll work. Weird box in the middle of the screen. What do you mean? You talking about this one? Like the one right below me? The one down here? That was where the second camera was, but I don't have it yet. If that's what you're talking about, Anthony. Are you talking about on the scope? Yeah, it's just the crosshair thing. Let me see if I can... turned it off instead of... Yeah, it's the microscope's little self-centering box. I turned the camera off, now I can't turn it back on. Turn on, camera. I think it's on. Maybe, we'll see. Yeah, it's on. There we go. That's off. This is an A20 3662 2013-14 MacBook Pro 15-inch. I was reading Lewis's forums. Duke was talking about this. Lewis was talking about this. The only thing that seemed to have worked for them is they're thinking that these are these power MOSFETs, the power control chips for these, are what fail. can't remember how I get it. There we go. So I just so happen to have some that left over from when I fixed Anthony's that had a shorted control IC there, that I'm going to go ahead and replace these 3 and see if it stops the issue. Not the same model that has the video issue. Brian, I'm not sure. Like, this is a newer MacBook Pro. Like, it's not like a 2011 or something. Like, these are a different version. And this one also had, when it came in, the standoff here was ripped off the board. I've seen this a couple times on these models. I don't know if it's from user error or if it's from drops or what, but I've seen a few of these with the same damage. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and replace these A12-1398. No, this one's newer. This is a Retina. So I'm going to mark orientation on these so I can remember. I'm just going to scratch the board just so I remember where the orientation is. Alright, so we'll start by taking off the first one. 1398. Yeah, it's the first year of the Retinas. The board's still different. I think they have a dedicated GPU on them. What's up, Rig Tech? So let's go ahead and take off this first IC, and we'll replace them one by one. Actually, I might just pull them all since the board will be warm. This being right next to the CPU heatsink, it's going to take a little bit of heat to get these off. Especially since these have a fairly large ground pad under them also. Okay, so it's starting to get there. Okay, so that one's off. What's up, Curtis? Yeah, it seems to be a V-core issue because these have an integrated all-in-one CPU GPU on these. Yeah, Rick, it's good to be streaming again. Any way to connect a USB interface device to an iPad Pro adapter or hub? I don't know if Apple has OTG cables. They may, actually. I can't say yes or no offhand, but I think they actually do make an OTG cable. You'll just have to kind of get online. Just look for Apple OTG. On the go is what it stands for. And see if they make a cable that goes for USB. What are you trying to do, I guess, is the question, Curtis. Like, what's the point of the USB adapter? If you're going to connect like a hub to it, I don't know that they will work or not. There's the second one off. Apple does have USB options. I have a cable here that will work. Melt my backlight connector here, but it is seeing some heat. Okay, so we got all those off. And we're going to go back and clean that up with leaded, that way the new chips will go down pretty easily. Joshua, they make a USB adapter. I was trying to use it to try to get past a phone that had no touch. The only problem is you can use it, but you can't have it hooked up to a computer at the same time. I tried to splice it in to where I could use the USB side and a keyboard side with it, and it wouldn't let it work, because the USB protocol will only work one direction. It can't talk to two devices. So what would end up happening with those is I would connect the keyboard and I would type in the passcode, and then I would plug it up to the computer, and it wouldn't recognize the computer. But if I unplugged the keyboard and plugged it into the computer first and then tried to plug in the keyboard, it wouldn't recognize the keyboard. So whichever device was plugged in first to start with is the one that would work. I picked up a cap there, but didn't mean to. We'll put that guy back on here in a second. And I've even tried with different style, like Apple keyboards and stuff that are specifically made for it. None of them seem to work that way. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like there's much option as far as using those as any type of data recovery option. Come on, Brady, get up to 10. That's weird, that braid's not wanting to take any solder on. I'll give it some flux, see if that'll help it out. There we go. Hey Greg, what's up? So I'm going to put this cap back into place, and then we're going to get rid of the excess solder that's on the end of it. Okay, so it's back on. Yeah, Anthony, that may work. I think I've actually heard people say that it does work. So I'm just trying to make sure I've got a decent amount of solder on those pads. That way when I come back and put that new chip on, it will take to it. So we're going to do the same thing with the next section. Just going to flood it with leaded solder. I'm just barely touching the board here. I'm not like scraping it or anything. If you go and start scraping on this board, there's a good chance it will lift some stuff up that you don't want lifting. I'm just trying to mix in the leaded solder, get rid of the lead free, and then That way when I put my stuff back on, it'll drop on at a lower temperature. Easier to work with. Yeah, YouTube doing different stuff. Okay. We'll make sure to clean all this up here in a second. Mainly just trying to get the center pad flowed well with solder, but not so much that it causes possible bridging. I know Lewis will tend to mash them down and push all the solder out, but I feel like that can be a little dangerous on this chipset because there's so many pads that are ground and so many that are power on this thing. I worry about those bridging together. See if I can just wick. Nope, it don't want to do that. It does not like it at all. Alright, so those are all cleaned up. Now we'll put on our new chips. I guess orientation wasn't that important since the bottom pads kind of dictate where we have to be here, but always good to mark it if you're not sure. Thank you, Greg. Appreciate the support there. So we'll go ahead and sit our chipset back down. Now this should drop on at a much lower temperature now. We're still going to have a little bit of excess solder in the center, but we shouldn't have a whole lot. Okay. We'll go through and solder the legs on this. Better late than never, Rick. Okay, got that side soldered. To go back in and clean those up. I need to get the tip that Lewis uses on these, that razor tip. Make it a lot easier. But this gets the job done. Just doesn't carry the same amount of heat. Plus it's not as thin, so I end up doing this crap where I'm bridging all these caps together and I'm gonna have to take all that off. So we'll clean that up. I want to check the joints there. That's soldered as well as I want it to be. No, it's not. Those pads aren't even touching. We'll go ahead and pull it back off. I may check the bottom of that chip and see if it's taking solder or not.
Oh yeah, like most of them are just like, I always, if someone's like, oh, I want
Yeah, so we got several legs there, they're dry. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is just tin these actual pads on the chip. And that way when I go to put it on the board, they should take easy. That one's almost oxidized.
Yeah, and if it doesn't work out, just let me know and like I'll help figure out like how to get, if I get the recipe, can't do something, I'll figure out something for it.
So that looks a little better.
Do that on your own. I think it will, because I think he's gonna be like, I mean, he's still fucking it anyway. I think he just needs a little
don't know if you can see it, but yeah, you can't see it. It probably won't focus on. But yeah, there's still Vetus. I'm using Vetus and Best. It's two different brands. They're pretty much the same though. But they're both good. They both do well. They take the abuse and they're dirt cheap. So if I do mess them up, it doesn't really matter. All right, let's try this again.
Okay. Sounds good. Yay. Alright. Thanks. See ya. Bye.
Alright, we'll see if that does any better. This cap just doesn't want to stay on the board and just wants to come off. Get off on tweezers things. Well, with the cap off, it makes it a little easier to get into these pads. Come on, take solder, please. Thank you. You almost have to rub on the fucking chip to even get it to take it. Does not want to take solder though, that's for sure. More flux. Let's try using the big chisel tip and see how it does. Can't even get it in there all the way. Too large for the job. There, it finally took solder. Finally. Other sides take solder much easier. What's up, Bobby? I definitely need to get that knife tip. It would make that 100 times easier. I wouldn't have bridged everything there for a second. And I could get right up against the edge of that chip. Check and make sure it looks okay down the side. See, it still looks janky on that side. That side looks good. So I need to go down that side one more time. I'm sure the pads are probably connected, but I like to have a solder up the side of the pad there too, just to make sure. That way it's visually I can tell. These tweezers also don't carry a whole lot of thermal capacity. So when you hit these ground points, it really drags on it. And that's where that knife tip wouldn't have as much problem being on a bigger iron. You can see like the solder drags on the ground points out here towards the edge, instead of just creating a nice joint. I'm gonna add some excess heat from the outside here. There we go, that helped a lot. That little bit of extra heat helped it make those fillets really well. Bobby, why is it freezing there? Next one. Clean it up a little bit first. I'm going to tin this chip this time. Fix the furnace, then YouTube. Low in the 20s? That sounds amazing. Are they still open next door, Ashley? If they are, can you give me a Gatorade? Are they closed? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Oh. Alright, so, do we have any water here? Yeah. Thank you. What's up, Richard? So let's put down a Rossmann and around a flux here. Actually, I won't go as much as he does, but enough. More than enough. Now we're going to heat this one the same way, and hopefully our pre-tinning there is going to help us out. Okay. We'll do the same thing here. A little more flux and we'll refill that, and that one should be done. Got a notification on your phone but not on your laptop? Yeah, I found that notifications on computers are kind of hit or miss. Like when Lewis goes live, like I've got it set, but sometimes it doesn't say anything. But my phone will usually always go off. Okay, looks good. We'll check for shorts after this too to make sure that there's nothing connected to something that shouldn't be. These are pretty simple setups. They're a ground switch. It's just a buck converter in one. So on the older ones where you had two separate MOSFETs, these have this MOSFET's internal, and they do all the switching internally, so you don't have a giant chipset with external MOSFETs and all that. Just simplifies the package. Alright, last one on the list. See if I can build these up a little on the board. Again, we have more ground here. And now touch the center pad. Get a giant wisp of solder on it. No flux turns into nightmares. This is what using the wrong tool for the job looks like. I'm having to struggle with things that should be fairly easy. But since I don't have the right tip, it makes it that much harder. So one more of these, we'll do the same thing, we'll go ahead and tin it. Not change tips. I don't have the right one that I need. I need to order it. I had it in my cart on Amazon and I never ordered it. It's a little knife tip like Lewis uses for the bigger iron. It literally just looks like the end of a knife, but it carries a lot more thermal conductivity because it's on the larger iron. I'm just touching my center pads now. We'll just have some extra solder to squirt out there. I don't get to work on Macs much, so it just never is overly necessary for me to have them. But we've recently been doing work for a company that has quite a few MacBooks, so I'm probably going to have to order it. The tweezers and the iron that I have that I normally use for iPhones and iPads is more than adequate. This, however, becomes a little more challenging. It's kind of odd because Macs are so much larger components, but it's a little more awkward when you don't have the right equipment for it. And that's vice versa too. If you're working on iPhones, the same thing could be said. Try to knock these pads down some so when I come in here I can place this chip a little easier. Squeeze all the excess out. Okay. Now we'll properly solder this down now. Oh, still too hot. Move the whole chip. These larger flat mounted chips like this don't sit in place as easily as some of the larger ones do, or the smaller chips do. I actually prefer BGA chips for that reason, because they'll kind of self-center. You don't have to do any extra work. Just kind of put it in place and roll with it. Yeah, I use Vitas. Cheap, sharp point, tend to hold up pretty well. I know there's some on the market that are better quality and stuff, like probably would last longer, but how much longer and how much more expensive are they? I haven't seen too many advantages going to like really expensive like titanium tweezers or anything like that. I don't see the advantage of it. Maybe they just last so much longer and I don't realize it. I don't know. In my experience, that hasn't been the case. Like, these last just as long as everybody else's do. I abuse tweezers a lot too, so it's probably best that I don't buy expensive ones. Yeah, I've not really had much problem with it. I do abuse them though a lot. Like, I use them to prowl and shit and stuff, so I always bend the crap out of the ends of them. That looks pretty good. I'm going to check for shorts here. CPU V-core line is low resistance to start with, but there's a difference between low resistance and shorts. And I think that's one common problem people have with distinguishing issues with motherboards. They'll be like, my CPU shorted. I'm like, what is it? They're like, it's 100 ohms. Like, that's normal. You don't want your CPU being high resistance. It already gets hot as is on low resistance. Can you imagine what it'd be like if it was high resistance? If you build it, they will come. What are we building? How do you get into this field? I got into it because I've always worked on friends' electronics, like cars and stuff. So I used to wire up their vehicles all the time whenever we would do motor swaps, because the harnesses we'd have to match two harnesses together. And then, so that kind of gave me a background on how to understand schematics, like kind of put two and two together, what wire goes where. Motherboard's essentially just a neater version of a cluster of wires. So I understood when I looked at a schematic kind of how to read them. I didn't know what the components were or how they worked, but that's just all looking up stuff. Alright, so that's coming up. Let me cool the CPU down, it's still warm. I'm going to check my resistance and make sure it looks normal. It's not hot, but it's warm. Yeah, resistance is coming up. So, right now we're at 20 ohms and rising. It was at 5 before I cooled it off. Okay, everybody's consistent, which they should be. They're all on the same CPU V-core line. Make sure I'm not shorting VCC main across. VCC main is not shorted, while PP bus G3 hot on these. Okay, Let's see if I still get fan spin, which we should. Where's my charger cable at? There it is. Don't fall. Okay, so we still get fan spin. Green light to orange light, so that's good. I know CPU is working. I'm going to clean this up a little more. And we can chit chat while I do that. That's where I started fixing computer issues and wiring cars and doing V8 fuel injection swaps on the stins. Yeah, so, like, I started out doing, we always did swaps on Nissans. So the big thing was we would take the Japanese motors and put them in the US cars. Well, the harnesses were fairly close, but they had some differences. And then I put in my own personal Nissan 240SX, I put a Chevy V8 in it, which the wiring is actually fairly simple to make the engine run. But I did a lot more on like just making sure all the subsystems worked, like your instrument clusters and AC and all that stuff. Like I wanted to make sure all those systems would work together. And they're fairly simple, but looking at a schematic on a car and then looking at a schematic for an ECU or looking at a motherboard schematic or anything like that, they're fairly simple. Like they're similar in the way they work. You just follow the line, see where it goes. The thing for me was learning what's a diode, what's a transistor, what's a capacitor, how do they work. I kind of knew how caps worked. I didn't know all the ways they were used. I didn't fully understand how transistors worked, but I did understand how relays work. So when I was explained how a transistor works, I could relate it to a relay. What's up, Alex? And I kind of did all that stuff. Like I related a lot of it to things that I already knew. A 305 into a 240, nice. I put a 2005 or 6 liter fuel injected motor out of a 2500 Silverado. So it was a 6.0 V8 fuel injected, and then I did a stroker kit on it, so it was a 408 motor. It's pretty fun. What's up, Flash Repair? But I didn't really work on motherboards or anything. What's funny is like I worked at a factory and I got fired from that job, and I was thinking of things to do, and one of my friends had a water damaged MacBook, and they're like, can you fix it? And I was like, oh, maybe. I was like, I've worked on other electronics before. I was like, water damage is usually where you see damage is where the problem is. So I told him I'd give it a shot, and I got online and I googled MacBook no green light, because it wasn't getting a green light. It was a 13-inch 2009. This was back in 2007 or 8 I worked on it. It'd been 8 probably. And I was like, well, let me give it a shot and see what I can do. And I looked up on Google and I found a video from Lewis, and I watched Lewis's video. This was back, way back when Lewis was still working. He was switching between the front and the back of the store where he would work. I think he had a few thousand subscribers at the time, maybe 2,000 or so. And I watched this video, and he had a one-wire circuit video, and I downloaded the schematic and I followed along with what he was doing, and I recognized the similar conditions between what I was missing and what he had. And I didn't have any of the tools for it at the time. I had a giant soldering iron. I had like, I don't know, like 16 gauge wire and stuff. So I made a jumper on this board for the 3V42 line that had burned out, going to the one wire circuit. And I made a big giant jumper, and it worked though. And I made like $100 and something on it. And then I started doing iPhones, just screens and stuff. But I was buying MacBooks on the side. I started off buying, I bought one MacBook on eBay that was water damaged. I got it in, it had the same failure. It had a one-wire circuit failure. So I fixed that one, resold it. I sold it the same week that I got it, and then I took the money that I got from that sale. I sold it for $400. It was a 2010. I took the 400 and bought 2 more. Actually, I bought 3 more MacBooks on eBay that were liquid damaged, and I got 2 of them working, and the other one I couldn't get working. But I sold those 2 and I made another $800. So then I took that $800 and I bought 3 more MacBooks, and one of the ones I got in just had a bad hard drive. So I turned around and sold it immediately. And then the other 2 both had liquid damage, and I got one of those working. One of them was severely water damaged. It was a 15-inch model, and I couldn't get it working. But then, after I did all this stuff with Macs, I got a water damaged iPhone in. Actually, take that back, it was a pry damaged iPhone 4S. Somebody had pried on the wrong side of the battery, trying to replace their own battery, and had knocked one of the little components off right next to the board. I didn't have, like, I had a microscope, but I could barely see it because the zoom on it was just enough that I could see components on the MacBook fairly well, but on iPhones things were still tiny. And I didn't know what temperature to use or anything like that. I was just using my hot air, and I was like refilling the crap out of it, and I was like, okay, hopefully it's melted. And I turned it on and it worked. And I was looking at this iPhone board and I was like, there's no way I could work on this. Like, these are way too small. It's the iPhone 4 where components are actually still fairly large. But I kept saying to myself, I was like, there's no way you can work on these boards. I was like, it's not possible for people to work on this stuff. It's too small. And then that's when I found Jess's videos. And I wanted to get into iPhones because I felt like Macs were going to get kind of flooded, which it was kind of opposite, because there's not a whole lot of people that do Macs, but there's a shit ton of people that do iPhones now. But I wanted to get into phones because I felt like there was more people with them, and they were more likely to have damage because people carry your phone around all the time. So I started watching Jess's videos, and I bought a better scope that was still, it was a 20x zoom, which was better, but it still wasn't great. And then I finally bought one that had a higher zoom rate like these. And I started working on iPhones and learning the ins and outs of them. And if you know Macs, you can transfer to iPhones fairly easily. The systems work pretty closely the same. Okay. I'm going to put this back in the frame and we'll test this. Yeah, finding components that you drop on phones is ridiculous. What did you say fan for? Was it close up of a fan? Are you talking about the fan noise? Sorry about the fan noise. I have to have them on though. It's the only way I can blow the fumes away from my face so I'm not inhaling them constantly. I don't have a fume extractor. I should probably get one, but I feel like they're so loud sometimes, like it just gets annoying. I just use a fan to blow across me. I'm doing this the hard way, but it's also the lazy way. Not removing the fan from the housing. Trying to put this back in the frame. So hopefully this will solve our issues, and we won't have any more rebooting issues or shutdown issues. I call it rebooting, but it's not really rebooting. The computer goes into a power state where the backlight's on and the computer doesn't show anything, and then the backlight turns off after a minute, and then you have to hit the power button to turn it back on, and it'll do this over and over. It doesn't do it right away. It takes a little while, but once it's warm it starts doing it constantly. because I tested it for a while and it didn't do it, but now it's been doing it pretty consistently, to the point that the computer locks up and then goes blank and then restarts. All these cables just tuck under the board every time. It's very annoying. Trying to get all this back in place. I'm not gonna try to redo all these screws yet. I want to see if it will work properly. No, but I'm gonna have to call them because it's been.
It's supposed to be on
Tuesday.
It said Tuesday 11th. The 11th was the.
It's estimated delivery date.
Yeah.
It hadn't moved from New York. I'll get you a Hako fume extractor. I thought about just getting a vacuum and putting it in the back room. Just a quiet vacuum, put a long hose on it, run it up through the ceiling. Create a shit ton of static electricity. If I can put this screw in, I'll feel like less of an idiot. There we go. Yeah, last time I checked it said that it was in the US like on the 30th, but it hadn't moved yet. I've been waiting on that connector for multiple devices. Because I have one here, same thing, connector was broken. Chinese shippers are not the greatest. I thought about getting one of the fume extractors that sits inside the scope. I don't know how loud they are though. Lauren has one. What'd you say? Like a month ago almost. Yep. It's the same connector for the Surface. Yeah, on the 30th. It's been a month ago. What, hot air station? Yeah, it's a AU unit. It's cheapo. It gets a lot of flack, but every test that I put it through, it passes. I mean, I've had mine for several years with no problems. I had an older unit and it still works. I just retired it because this one had more stuff on it that I liked. It has an auto sleep feature and stuff that you can turn on. I don't use it much though. I just let it run all day. Yeah. But I paid $80 for this unit and it's lasted me several years and I have no problems with heating on it. Like I don't have it cranked all the way up for these components I was replacing on this Mac like a lot of people do. Like Lewis runs his shit on max airspeed. I've got mine turned up to 80% and the temperature's not even set all the way up. It's set to 420. If I run it on max air, max heat, chips come off just as fast as they do on any other unit that are set to the same settings, so I can't complain with it. And I know several people that use them that have not had any issues with theirs either. And the heating elements for them, if they do go out, are like 20 bucks. Like, I can't complain. Still want the Quick. I like the Quick. I have nothing against that one. It's a nice unit. They seem really well made. I don't have any need to spend more money right now on one. Until this one fails, I won't be. Alright, so I got most of my screws back in. Just enough to... I need to hold these fans down. I don't want those flopping out. I remember when the quick units first came out, a lot of people didn't like them because they were cheap. But the one that they have now, the 851 or whatever it is, that model is far different than what the original quicks look like. Some of their smaller units were just pathetic. These new ones are much better. The only thing I don't like about them is I don't like the constant cooldown setup on them. Like when you put them in the holder, I feel that's kind of annoying because then you constantly have to heat it back up. All right, let's make sure this boots still. Yep, still boots. Still have Apple logo. All right, so. Log in here. We'll see if it does the same thing, I guess. You see your box? Where? Oh yeah, it's right here. We're gonna do that next, Anthony. It's the last thing we're doing. So the Mac's up and running. It is a mid 14, 15-inch i7 16 gigs of RAM with Intel Iris Pro graphics. It seems to be running well. I don't know if it's a placebo effect, but it almost seems like it's loading up faster. I think that's probably placebo effect, but who knows. It loaded up really quickly. I mean, the only thing I can do now is just kind of let it sit and run and see what it does. I'm going to put the bottom cover on it and just sit it on the table here and let it chug along, let it run some stuff, see if it shuts off on me. If it doesn't shut off, we'll call it fixed. This one's really been difficult to diagnose because for several days I had used it and just run like constantly with no problems. And then today, right before I was pretty much going to call it and say, well, I don't know what's wrong with it, it started looping. So I looked up, well, not looping, but shutting off. So I looked up the symptoms, and like I said on Lewis's forums, there were other ones that had the same exact symptoms. So we'll apply the fix. We'll change out all the chips for the CPU V-core. And I'm just gonna let it run and see what it does. It's running fine right now. I'll go ahead and put a YouTube video on it and let it play. Roid Rage, that sounds good. Alright, so that's running a YouTube video. Just so you all think I'm not lying to you. Running YouTube videos. We'll see what it does. Now let's move on to Anthony's box of nightmares. We're going to show off his lewd artwork first. Anthony has done something that no person should do, and that he has drawn a picture of his penis for us, and he has sent it here. Now I can only assume that this is an exaggerated view. It may be to scale. I don't know, but we want to put the dick on the screen. And I don't know, Anthony, that the head of that's a little large, but that might be how you're rolling. I don't know. But just so everybody can see Anthony's penis. Self-portrait, by the way. Hung like a stud rat. Yeah, pretty much. Anthony's packing it. Had to use the AMScope to see it to draw it. Well, I mean, I'm impressed, Anthony. The scale is pretty good. There's not enough bubble wrap on this, though. We're still going. I'm going to hold the bubble wrap up so we can see it. So it's in the box still. Hold on. So it starts here, and it goes down, and it keeps coming down, and then here's the phone. So we're still going to unwrap it here. We're going to keep going. Anthony, what are you doing? You didn't put it in a bubble wrap bag inside the bubble wrap. So let's count the feet. How many feet of bubble wrap is this? Anthony's king of the bubble wrap, so there's no such as overkill for Anthony. Nobody can ever blame their phone being broken and shipping on Anthony. It's just not possible. I think you could run it over with a forklift, it would still be okay. I don't even know where my other screwdriver went. Where did you go, screwdriver? Are you on the floor? That's where they always end up. What's the food plan tonight? I don't think I can eat, I don't know. I don't know where my Phillips head went. It's kind of disconcerting. Did he? He probably did. Nobody talks about underkill, that's true.
Pretty one.
Yeah, that's it. Don't live through the underkills, that's true. So the first problem we can see with this phone, and Anthony, you can't send this back to me. Let's admire the headphone jack and the nice indentation that it has right there. It's a nice elliptical shape now. I don't know what shape is that. Can you put a headphone in there anymore? Is this original? As you can tell, this phone has never been dropped. Your screen was just bad, Anthony, and that's why it broke. Never drop this phone ever. Nightstand. What's up, Kino? Kino's in the house. I believe so. Looks like the Kino we know. The gory hole. Well, based on Anthony's drawing, he may be using it as a glory hole. Not sure. It's custom. Get your hammer and bang it out. Yeah, pretty much. Alright, so the problem with this one is Anthony says it has no backlight, from what I understand. Is that correct, Anthony? No backlight, no image. Okay, never mind. It was dropped from a vehicle. So even better. Dropped from a moving vehicle. I guess that explains the ellipsis in the headphone jack there. Alright, so first things first, Anthony says this is no image, no backlight. So we need to check, is this no image, no backlight, or is this no power, no boot? So I'm going to try to sneak my old cable in here. What'd you miss? Everything, Chuck. Everything. It is recognized by PC. Well, that's a good start. Alright, so I'll give it 4.2 volts. We're going to apply power. Alright, so we have no abnormal current draw. I'll show you the DC power supply. So with the cables hooked up and on, which you can see right here, the light is on. I can turn it off. I can turn it on. We're getting relatively nothing. That's normal for just the cables being connected. And we're going to prompt it to boot and see what we get. So the amp draw is abnormal. It's very low, which tells me that we're not getting image right now because there's no power possibly going to the screen. Normal booting voltage for these, when you first turn it on, it should be well, it's not booting up for me. It's hanging at about 100 milliamps and then it loops off and on. Oh, hold on, it might boot up now. It's hanging out at 80 milliamps now. I needed the iPod Touch 6th Gen rear camera and stuff. Was it on there?
Yeah, it was.
Okay. Yeah, I need that. The one that was in that iPod 6th Gen, whenever I was taking it out, I guess, I don't know, I ripped it somehow. I thought I pulled it loose from the frame, but I guess I didn't. It's ready, it just needs that camera. I was going to go ahead and order more ports too, since we're down to only one. Port and battery. We're low on batteries too. Do you have the same program for the laptop? What do you mean flash repair? What? iPod batteries. Paul Daniels software? Yeah, I've got it. iPhone 7 came with no ear jacks, so Anthony figured he didn't need it either. That's true. What?
Series 5 and 6.
Yeah. Get batteries for both. We don't have any 5th gens. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and pull the board on this just so I can kind of get an overview of what's going on with it. And I'll retest the booting ability of it once we get it out. I don't need no screens, I don't think. I think we have one black and two white back there. Charge ports, we only have one white, I believe. Paul Daniels does rock, I agree. His software is awesome. And the great thing about Paul is he's receptive to people's suggestions, which has only made the software even better. And the fact that he programs in general is amazing to me, because I don't know jack shit about programming. I am not good at it. I couldn't code a single line if you asked me to. I used to do, when I was younger, I used to write HTML code for websites. I don't even remember how to do it now. I know like the basics, but I look back at what I was doing and I was like, Jesus Christ, what the hell? I don't know what I'm doing now. I can't even remember half of it. So there is a slight bend in the board here. As you can see, it's crinkled in the metal here. So there's a bend here upward. So it's flat and then bends up. Let's see if this metal shield's broken away. Yeah, so this front shield here is broken away. You can actually just grab it and pull it away. So there's a chance, being that Chestnut is in here, that Chestnut may be broken, or worst case scenario, CPU's fucked. And the data lines for image under the CPU have broken free, which are right there on that edge next to Chestnut. We'll be able to test that by doing a diode reading of the LCD FPC and seeing if anything looks abnormal. Okay, so looking at Chestnut here, it looks okay visually. Let's see if his boost coil is loose at all. It does look a little loose. So it could be very well that it's just the Chestnut boost coil here. So Chestnut has a 6-volt boost coil. It has internal switching that take the battery voltage from 4.2 or 3.7 or whatever it's at, and it boosts it up to 6 volts, and then it redistributes that out as a 5V7, a 5V7 negative, and a 5V1 positive. So, okay, I'll see you at home. Love you. So looking at it, if I press on this coil, that coil is moving up and down just ever so slightly. I don't even know if you all can see it, because I'm sure it's not the clearest. But if I push on that coil, you see the movement in it there? It just barely moves. Like it's got a little bit of a wiggle to it. So if this coil is broken away, this chestnut can't boost the voltage, so it can't create image. So let's see if it even turns on, because this very well could be our problem. And we'll look at the schematic too, so we can kind of see how that works. I'm going to put a screen on it just to check and see if I press on that coil, if we get image on boot. Because if we do, we'll be in business. Greatest thing about Paul is doing the software is he's actually programming, but uses it himself. Yeah, I agree. And Paul is always really open to listening to people's suggestions. Not always are they the best ideas, but alright, so I'm going to prompt to boot. Yep, so it was the coil. So when I pressed down on that coil, it faded out now, but you can see the line where it was. When I pressed on that coil, I get an Apple logo. So I'm going to try pressing on it again while it's on. Yeah, I got backlight only now. Let me reboot the phone, and I'm going to try to bring the camera over so you all can see the screen, possibly here. Crotch cam here. I'm going to put pressure on that coil, and then I'm going to prompt it to boot. Oh no, it's sliding away. You can see we have Apple logo there. So I'm pressing on that coil right now. And if I keep pressure on it, it will probably keep image. But if I let go of that coil, I'll try to do this in a way that I don't drop the camera. I'll let go of the coil. See, watch, the image fades out because the coil is no longer making connection, so Chestnut can't boost it anymore. So our problem is Chestnut coil. So we'll look at the schematic now and kind of see how that works. Yeah, just keep constant pressure on the coil. It's all good. So my suspicions is the coil hasn't broken from the pad. More than likely the coil has broken physically, because the way the coil is made, and I showed somebody this the other day, one of the local guys here, David. The coil is actually literally that. It's a coil of wire inside of a epoxy and metal kind of mixture. So if you break a coil up, you can actually see the small bits of metal inside of it, and that's what creates your magnetic field whenever the coil has power going through it. That's why they call it an inductor. It induces a magnetic field when you apply power through it. And the reason that you need that magnetic field is because whenever you shove power into it, it wants to resist that change, and it can actually smooth out your power curve. And whenever you use a DC to DC boost converter, that system takes that magnetic field and actually creates a voltage increase. Let me pull up the schematics here. I'm just making sure that Mac's still working. It is. So a boost circuit works by using a transistor, a coil, and usually some type of diode. I don't know if this one needs a diode or not. I assume it's probably internal to the chip, as is the transistor in that system. Alright, so 6 plus, we'll switch you over to schematic view. Get rid of that, and then we're going to scroll down. We want U1501. Alright, so here is Chestnut. So So Chestnut here, this is the coil that's damaged. So when Chestnut needs to boost voltage, you can see it's actually a SW line. And if we go, let me see, I think backlight is nearby. Yeah, so backlight's right here. So if you look on the Chestnut chip, it has a switch line. And if you go over here to your backlight driver, it also has a switch line. And that's because it's a boost circuit. It uses the coil as part of the boost circuit. And if you look, it's almost the same orientation. It has a coil on the input. Even though this looks weird, you can imagine this line and this line are the same. This coil just sits on this line between these 2 points. So if we go up here, you can see the switch line and the VIN match the switch line and the VIN, which they call it IN here, but it's the same line. So that coil is part of a switching circuit. And I assume internal to this chipset we have a diode and transistor setup that allows it to take VCC main voltage. It is always the coil. It allows you to take VCC main voltage, which can range from anywhere from 3.7 volts to 4.2 volts. It then boosts that circuit, and if you look over here, it has a 6 volt LCM boost output, and that output doesn't go to anything but 2 caps. So you're thinking to yourself, why would it just go to 2 caps? Well, since they don't have an external switching and they don't have an external diode, if we go back down here and look at the backlight circuit, the backlight circuit also has output filtering caps. Those caps are there so that the voltage that's created by this circuit, which is a coil, a diode, and the switching IC, it has to smooth that electricity out on output, or you'll get crazy ripple on the output, which can burn up either the chip or it can burn up the component it's going to. So since this is an internal boost and it doesn't go to an external output, it goes back into the chip. They use these capacitors here to smooth out that electricity, and then the chip then takes the voltage, that 6 volts that it's created, and it breaks it up, and you can see them over here. It makes a positive voltage 5V7 for Sage, which is the AVDH, which is high, stands for high, and then it also makes a negative voltage. When you create a switching circuit, it makes it can make a sine wave. It can make a negative, positive, an alternating current. So you have 12 volt, or the 5V7 negative there. And then if you look down here, you also have 5V7 LCM high, which is a 12 volt or a 5 volt positive. I keep saying 12 volt, thinking about a power supply. And then you also have 5V7 positive for great, VDDH high for great voltage, and those are touch and LCM voltages. What's up, Freddie? So if you think of this chipset here, it is essentially the same circuit as this. It's just all contained inside of this chip. And that's what this cap over here is for also. Where we get our negative voltages, this cap here is part of the AC circuit that gives you your negative positive. So if you look at it, it says PP Chestnut CP positive, PP Chestnut CN negative. So it actually has an alternating current that's created inside of this to give you an output of 5V7 negative and 5V7 positive. If you ever work on a computer, you'll see that power supplies now come with a 12 volt negative, 12 volt positive, and even some of them have other negative voltages on the actual power supply. Now, I'm not 100% sure how they use the negative voltage side. I would have to look into that. That's something I don't know. Somebody in chat may know why they use the negative side, but that would be something I would have to look up. But so that kind of explains how that circuit works. This coil though is our problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to head and go in here and remove this coil. and we'll replace it with another one. So to avoid using hot air as much as I can, I don't like to use hot air around the CPU, but since this one is broken, it should come off fairly easily with a little bit of hot air. I'm going to grab my coins. We'll sit them on top of the CPU here. And I want to try to be quick as I can with this. I'm actually going to break it off the board here. They just crumbled on me there. Actually, we can see, this will be a good learning lesson right here. So we actually see inside the coil here when I break it up. So when they call it a coil, it's called a coil because there's literally a coil wire inside of it, and there's the actual wire that's inside of it. Let me switch you all back over to the scope view. See you, Bobby. So you can actually see the wire that's coiled inside of these. So if I pull it up, I can unravel the wire. It's epoxied together. There you go. That's the wire that's in there. And it has one lead that goes to this side and one lead that goes to this side. And you can actually see, if you've ever seen a transformer, it makes the same style. So you've got a center post of metal, and if you look into the actual makeup of this, you can see little bits of metal inside of this encasement that it makes. There's actually little chunks of metal in there. And it's like a resin mixed with little chunks of metal, and that helps with the magnetic field that the coil creates. Let me see if I was correct in assuming this. No, actually it looks like this was broken away from the pad. Yeah, I can lift that up. See how it moves? So that coil was actually physically broken off the pad. See, I just knocked it off without even doing anything. You can see the solder here has physically broken away from the pads on the bottom of this. Let me find if I haven't flicked it off into the nether regions. I don't think I can find it again. I was going to say we could look at the bottom of that coil, but I think I flicked it off the table. Oh well. But you can see what our failure was. This was a physical failure of the solder joint due to that impact. I'm going to use a little bit of heat to try to get some of this underfill out of the way. Okay. So now we'll just take some flux. Need to get rid of this piece of wire that's still hanging out. I'm just going to tin these pads with some leaded solder that's on the end of my tweezers here. And I'm also going to clean up this underfill here to kind of give me some more room for my coil to sit well and flush. Alright, so we'll clean up those pads. I want to get rid of any old junk that may be left over from the old coil. A little flex goes along. Flux or flex? A little flex? Are you talking about the board flexing or the flux? So again, this is part of the bottom of that coil there. It's actually the pad from the bottom of it, looks like. So we'll take that off the board. Come in with my leaded solder here. Okay, I'm going to try to get rid of some of that. I don't need that much on my pads. If you have too much solder on your pads, what will happen is when you put your component down, it's going to squish out to the sides, and then you have a possibility of shorting something else out. So I'm going to just dry my iron a little bit, get rid of the solder that's on it, and then come back in and touch those pads and pick up a little bit more. This is an easy way to pick up a little bit of solder at a time so you're not stripping the pad completely. Alright, that should be good. That'll leave us enough to solder to, and now we'll go grab one off another board. Those are 6S. I wonder if the 6 has one on the back, since it might be on the front still. Might be too large for the hole though. The 6 uses a larger coil, so we can't use the 6 board. I have to find a 6 plus. I got a bag of 6 pluses here somewhere. There they are. Hey Q-Tech, what's going on, man? Alright, do you have... This one has a larger coil too. That's odd. Must be 2 different revisions, because that one's a larger coil. That one is also... Here's the smaller one. We'll use this one instead. This one will be a little easier to solder. That's still a larger coil than what we had originally. You can see I've been scraping this one to look at long screw damage. You can see the traces under there. This one has less underfill though, so this should be a little easier to deal with. Just waiting for that to melt. It's getting to that point almost. You want to be gentle when taking these coils off, because since they're made of an epoxy mixture of metal, that epoxy can fall apart if you're too aggressive with it. And if it falls apart, then you've got to scavenge another one. And it just makes the process that much longer. Alright, so we're going to cover our CPU up again. And we're going to melt this coil down onto its pad, which with the leaded solder is not going to take very long. And that's the advantage of putting leaded here, is our working temperature is much lower than surrounding components, so you have less chance of burning something up that uses lead-free solder versus the leaded. We'll let that cool off. Careful with that long screw damage. Yeah, that was... We don't know how long that screw damage was. Evidently it was adequate. Just enough, the right touch. Yeah, Q. Anthony sent in something, asked if I would stream, said he was going to give me a hand job or something. I don't know. I don't know what he called it. It just sounded fun. That's what it's going to take. You have to send in stuff and bribe me now to stream. No more free streams. No, I'm kidding. I enjoy streaming. It's just I never have time to do it. Ashley was here, so I had a little time to do it tonight. Alright, so hopefully if we did this correctly when I hit power here, we'll have image. Or it won't turn on at all. One or the other, you know. It's not turning on at all right now. Make sure this connector's in there well. Could very well be that we have 2 problems here. It's not wanting to boot at all right now. It's doing what it was doing earlier when before I pulled it. It's hanging out at a lower amperage. Oh, it might have CPU problems. It does. So Anthony, this might be a lost cause, buddy. I'm having to press on CPU to get the temperature up, or the voltage up. Yeah. So if I press on CPU, I get Apple logo. If I don't, I get nothing. So this might be a lost cause. So I'm pressing right on the top of the CPU, right there by chestnut, and I'm gonna prompt it to boot. If I can press hard enough. I don't know if I can press hard enough on in the air. Oh, I gotta press lower on the CPU, not by the chestnut. Well, maybe not. Jesus, it takes a lot of force. Might have to put this on the table to do it. So move this out of the way. Yeah, we've got broken traces under the CPU, I think. What's going on right now is the phone's not even wanting to boot unless I press on the CPU. So I'm pressing on it right now. See, we get Apple logo. So we can get data off of this. We'll just have to keep pressure on the CPU. But unfortunately, it looks like this isn't going to be a phone that's going to be usable. It's booting up. CPU is getting warm on my finger now. This will be a situation where we would clamp it, because CPU is about to get really hot because it's jumping up close to an amp now. It's hurting my finger. I switched to my thumb. I don't know, maybe it won't boot up. No, there it goes. It went up. It was hung there for a second. No, it looped. Oh no, it's on. So it's on right now. We have touch. See, as soon as I let go of the CPU though, screen went out. So don't re-hot CPU. Yeah, Anthony, it probably will work in the frame because the frame is bent a little. Not a whole lot, but it is bent just slightly. Right past the power button, it bends downward just a little bit. So Anthony, this is going to be a data recovery situation. Let me see if more than likely this is going to require screw clamps. I'll just put a normal clamp on it right now. Yeah, it's going to require a screw clamp, something that can put a little more pressure on it. These normal spring tension clamps don't seem like they're going to be enough. Yeah, it didn't put enough pressure on the CPU. Knock the camera off. So it's going to be a data situation, but good thing is it does boot up and has image now, so you can get data off of it. A battery line cap? Why, Aaron, don't worry about the caps. The filter is the main one you have to worry about. Do I have another 6 Plus that they can buy? I don't know if we have a 6 Plus. We have a 6S Plus maybe? I'll have to check and see what we have. It's in Franklin, if we have one. Reball it. Maybe after we get data off of it, I can try a reball. I've messed with CPU some. I mean, it's impressive. The furthest I've gotten with the CPU reball is I got the CPU back on and it was in DFU mode, but I wasn't able to get the RAM back on without it having a problem. Like, I put the RAM back on, and then when I would do a restore, it would give me like error, I don't remember, it's like error 12 or something like that. It was something weird, and I asked and they were like, yeah, it's RAM. I don't see much other than data recovery. Even in data recovery, it's kind of a stretch. I just don't see a whole lot of use for CPU reballing. It's time intensive. I may have been, Anthony. It's just really time intensive, and unless you're doing them all the time and you just become so fucking good at them that it's just nothing to do with CPU reball, I just don't see I don't see just reflow then. I don't see much purpose in it though. don't get me wrong, I'm not shitting on the people that can do it, because the people that can do it it's impressive. I mean, I wish I could have gotten the one that I got into DFU mode to fully boot back up. I would have been really happy, but to me, it's not a useful, practical tool. The preheaters, I think, have made it easier for the industry. I did mine without a preheater, which is not terribly hard. I mean, you put it on a lower temperature and you heat it up really slowly. The preheater just helps with that initial thermal shock. So as long as you do it at a low temperature and you raise the board temp at a steady rate, the CPU coming off is easy. Like, I've got some boards in my bag, I'm sure I can find them, that I've pulled CPU on and not broken the CPU and not ripped all the pads off and not warped the board so much that you can't use it. Like, let me see if I can find some of these. Like, I've practiced pulling CPUs several times. I've even practiced pulling RAM. That was the one that I practiced pulling RAM on. I don't know, actually. So you can see that. So that one, I just pulled the RAM off to see if I could do it. I know I got a board in here that has the CPU off, and it was one that I was practicing on that I fully cleaned. Here it is. Like, here's the one that I pulled the CPU on. I'll show you under the scope. It's got a few pads pulled, but they're all NC pads. I haven't done too many where it doesn't pull some pads, but as you can see, I mean, it's not too terribly difficult to do. And all the pads that are lifted here are all NC pads. This one I've scavenged for parts. As you can see, I've pulled pretty much everything off of it. But this one was just a practice board. I wanted to see how hard it was to pull, how hard it was to clean this underfill up. I still have some underfill along the edges, but the center of the board is clean. You could set a chip back down on top of that and be okay. Yeah, the preheater, I can see it helping. And preheaters are a huge thing for larger motherboards, where the amount of thermal capacity that the board has is so like crazy high that you have to preheat the board or you're going to burn the chip up. That's why you see a lot of these chips that people popcorn. It's because they can't get the chip off, so they just keep increasing the top heat and they're not preheating their board, so the board's just soaking up all that heat. That's one thing that preheaters are really good for larger boards. They don't have as much purpose with smaller boards. They're not needed so much, but with the newer underfilled stuff, it does become a little more useful, because getting that underfill to a temperature to where you can work with it without having to direct heat anything does make it a little easier. But preheaters are not a 100% necessity to do CPUs. They do make it easier though. It takes less time to warm the CPU up, less time to get it off, etc. One thing that I would be interested in is with the iPhone 7s, with the RAM being so thin and the underfill being so hard, that a preheater would make it easier to remove the CPU, reball it, and put it back on without having to touch the RAM. Fingernail and Bic lighter is enough. Yeah, I saw the lighter one. It's funny to me watching that video with the lighter and the baseband reball. Like, people are like, "Oh, that's crazy." I mean, it's funny, but it's a fucking blowtorch. I mean, it's the same as putting a hot air gun to it. It's smaller. I mean, there's nothing really crazy with it. Preheater helps with underfill. Yeah, I can see that. Like, heating up underfill with the wand it's nice, but it doesn't stay at a high temperature, so you have to heat it, clean a little bit, heat it, clean a little bit, so you're not melting the solder. with the preheater, I mean, if you set it at a temp, you can just sit in there and go and clean it up. I mean, that would be huge. The lighter in the base fan, yeah, somebody linked that. It was on Facebook. I don't even know where it was now. I think Union Repair posted it. So actually, it may be on Union Repair's either their Facebook page, or I think they have a YouTube channel too. I'm gonna let the hot air station finish cooling off, and then I need to plug in this MacBook. It's down to 30%. It's still running, hasn't shut off yet. Still over here playing old WWF videos. Evidently that's what the customer watched, so that was the first thing that came up on YouTube. I'm gonna plug it in. I'm gonna let it, if I can, if it'll autoplay all night, I'm gonna let it run all night. I want to see what it does. If it's on in the morning when I come in, then it's all good. Found it. What the fuck? Yeah, it's kind of funny. I was watching it though. I was like, that's not overly impressive. It's the same concept as using a hot air gun. It's just using a lighter, which has more risk, I guess, of burning the chip up. That poor Mac is corrupted now. Yeah. Right now, Triple H is talking to some guy. I don't know who he is. He's too new. Who are you, person? CM Punk. It's his most savage moments. But anyway, that's going to end it for the stream. I appreciate y'all hanging out. We had 26 people. Always impresses me that people still come around and watch me. I don't think I'm that entertaining, but hopefully you all do get some entertainment out of it. Hopefully you learn something. If I don't explain stuff well enough or anything like that, please let me know. I'll try to explain it as well as I can. Jessa does a pretty good job of explaining things. I'm trying to perfect that so that I can help people out better. It's the beard. Well, that'll stay around. We'll keep that. I need to trim it. It's getting a little out of hand. I need a haircut too. It's really long. So, yeah, I mean, I'm going to head home. Go hang out with the kid. He's sick, so hopefully he feels better. Hopefully he doesn't get me sick. But I'll be back here tomorrow. We may do another stream because I've got a few MacBooks I got to do. Mail-in is pretty well caught up. We got 3 packages left for mail-in, and then we got several mail-in MacBooks. And then I think that's about it. But anyway, I will see you all later. Thanks for coming to hang out with me. And if you have any questions or anything, leave them in the comments. I'll try to answer them for you. I'm pretty bad about answering them, but I try to read them every now and then, especially if we get back into this more regularly. But thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all later.